Beloved Creator of all that is, we are assembled today to once again join our hearts and minds, our spirits, into a force for good. We acknowledge you as our source of being and as the source of our doing what we do, for it is in your name. We are humbled and fervent, grateful for your continued guidance. We are bolstered knowing we are your feet on the ground, that it is your sacred ground upon which we walk. As in each breath that is you, so is each step. Let it be so, and so it is.
Thank you, Charlie.
My pleasure.
Hello, my name's Ron Vroom, and I'm the old white man talking head for the Oregon Statewide Jural Assembly. I'm bringing a little bit of information to you today regarding evidence and a preponderance of evidence. We have the internet, and it is so fabulous. You can go on the internet and prove anything you want. Anything. I have friends that go on the internet and they see Joe Biden as wonderful. He's doing a great job. He has a little trouble. He's an old man, but everything's okay. He's going to be just fine. And they can prove that all over the internet. And I can go on the internet and I can find a preponderance of evidence that Joe Biden is not doing well at all. So when you take that and you spread it out across this entire thing that we're dealing with, for example, the 13th Amendment, the Anti-Title of Nobility Act that was ratified in 1819 and was good until Oregon made a state in 1859. That's quite a while. There were a lot of states that came in during that time, and there were a lot of statutes at large printed during that time. And all during that time, 13 Tona was in our statehood documents. And then along came Lincoln, and the whole thing fell apart for whatever reason you want to pick that it fell apart. It did fall apart. And we no longer had a union. But the union was a confederation and perpetual union. It was a specific kind. A perpetual union, everybody's got to be in it or it's not perpetual. When South Carolina left, we lost the union. We were in color of law. There is no way you can find information on the internet or anywhere else that you can prove with any kind of a preponderance of evidence that the powers that should not be have ever fixed the union. Because the union is a confederation. What they did is they started federal, like in the Federalist Papers. There was no federal, it was an invention, and it's bogus. So, what we have to do is we have to look at this thing, in my opinion, from the beginning. And when you're looking for the evidence, don't be looking for evidence that proves your position. Look for the evidence that can disprove your position and see if you can disprove your position with real evidence. Stuff that's bogus is not evidence. It's there, it's written by the Washington District of Columbia, Inc. But you have to remember that bunch, the We the People of the United States of Washington District of Columbia, Inc., that bunch, has been in power since 1861. And everybody that goes to Washington knows it. They all know. They're all members of the same club, and we're not in it. George Carlin is absolutely right. So, what we're dealing with is how to overcome the feelings that our family, friends, and spouses have that say, Ron, you're batshit crazy. You're just a troublemaker. There's a few problems, yeah, but it's nothing like you say. And there's guys like me and women like me all over that know the truth, they have the evidence, and they're dealing with people that have other evidence. And the people with the other evidence are into the de facto. They want it to be good, and they'll do their best to make it that way, even if they're wrong. Doesn't make any difference. They're going to do their best to do their duty as they see it. And when they see it wrong, it causes a lot of problems. It's in families. There's members of families that look at things from the opposite point of view and come up with a different answer every time. So, what I'm going to try to do here, and it's try, I'm not sure I'm capable of doing it, but what we have here is from the very start, it may not be what you think it is. The founding fathers may have been really good at writing documents, and some say they're not even good at that. But they did write some documents. And for the first time in the written history of man, we wound up with people being sovereign, not a man or government being sovereign. No monarchs, no kings. Although George Washington was cousin to the king. Interesting. There's a lot of folks that say that those that were founders and leading the breakaway from England and Holland. Got to remember the Dutch were here too in New York, and the Spanish down in Florida, and the French up around the Great Lakes. There were a lot of Europeans here, and they all came with the mindset of they were subjects of their monarch. That mindset still permeates all the Brits, the Canadians, the Kiwis, and the Aussies, and several of the islands. That's who they are. So let's back up to the founding fathers that everybody wants to talk about being so great. Maybe, maybe not. But here's some facts. George Washington, the commander of the army fighting the monarch and his armies, insisted that everybody address him as Your Excellency. Okay. Seems a little pretentious to me, but that's what it was. And they went for it. He was Your Excellency. Then during the war that they were having, when he got into New York, which was then a royalist enclave, when he got there and took New York City back from the Brits and the Royalists, he hung 2 men, and then everything straightened out pretty good for him on New York, where my family came from, and fought in that war. Then we take a look at what's going on with the rest of those folks. When you read the first page of the Treaty of Paris that finished the supposedly Civil War and the War of 1812, that treaty was signed by 4 esquires. Esquire is a title of nobility. It's given by the king and presented to barristers and attorneys under the British Accreditation Registry, and they become esquires. Now, how did John Jay, Benjamin Franklin, and Adams all become esquires, agent for the king, when they're making a treaty for us? Well, when you read the treaty and you read the Northwest Ordinance, you find out they didn't do us a service. Excuse me. So when Franklin said you have a republic if you can keep it, he did not say we have a republic if we can keep it. He says you have a republic if you can keep it. Some people hold that Franklin was a spy, an agent for the monarch, double agent, and others say he was a triple agent. He was really on our side, pretending to be on the king's side while really being on our side. That's pretty convoluted. But we do know he was an esquire. Then we move on a little bit, and there was a guy named Alexander Hamilton. He was a banker, a representative of the Rothschild group from England. That was his niche. And some people didn't like that niche. And we had a vice president named Aaron Burr that killed Alexander Hamilton in the duel. And then he was exiled to Louisiana. The founding fathers were not all that cool. They wrote the documents and they held it together, however they did it. And then we have the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America with the small u, 1776. Then 1777, we have the Confederation and Perpetual Union, and they finally named us. They named us the United States of America. That's how they styled the name on the first page of the Confederation and Perpetual Union's articles. That was later changed to the Declaration of Independence. And now it's the 4th of July, shoot off firecrackers, and the whole meaning is lost. Except I found yesterday that my grandson-in-law, married to my granddaughter, They're both attorneys, read to his 3 children, my great-grandchildren, the Declaration of Independence yesterday on the 4th. Good for him. But he's still an attorney. He's still a member of the bar. He has an oath to a foreign entity. He's either a registered or unregistered foreign agent. They're against us. They're for them. And that goes all the way. People say Lincoln was a member of the bar. There is no evidence that he was a member of the bar. He was an attorney for sure. There was no bar association in Illinois. And what he thought, did, and all of that regarding to the bar, there's no proof. So there's no evidence. You can't prove it. It's not that it's like Biden, where you can go and look certain places and find one thing and look other places and find another thing, and they're both true. They're not honest, but that's a different thing. We're in a law form that says, he who can be deceived, let him. On Oregon, we've been deceived from the very start. We sent our statehood documents in 1857 to Washington District of Columbia. It was unincorporated at that time. It was corporate, but not incorporated. And they sent back our statehood documents in 1859. We know that Buchanan signed them because it's in his presidential papers, the day he did it and everything. So we know it was signed. So if it was signed, it had to have passed Congress. And if it passed Congress, you ought to be able to find it in the Library of Congress, but they won't show it. National Archives will not show it. You cannot get the Oregon statehood documents to look at them, to see what the truth is. However, we can look at 2 books written by a guy named Matthew Deedy, a carpetbagger attorney from California. He wrote the 2 histories of Oregon. They overlap. Started at 1848 and went to a certain date, started another date and went to the end of the Civil War. The 2 documents, the 2 books, they're big. I've looked at them. I haven't read them entirely, but a bunch. Both of them say that he saw the statehood documents, and the statehood documents did not include Amendment 13, the Anti-Title of Nobility Act. The statehood papers, do not show that. And it's written in his 2 books. However, we can't see the documents. They won't show them. We've pressed them several times at the Secretary of State's office. They won't do their job. So there is no evidence to back up the books that Matthew Deedy wrote and said that there is no Amendment 13. Amendment 13 is the one that was instituted by Lincoln's bogus government. However, not true, because you can look all over history on the internet, and many states have 13 tona in their statehood documents. Colorado published their statehood documents, and 13 tona is in Colorado's published statehood documents. Colorado was made a state way after the war, way after 1859. So you got to be careful. But if you look and you want to find out what's true, you can. Now, people are telling me that we have to have justice. Justice is not a guarantee. Remedy is the guarantee. That's what we're seeking, is remedy. We can't fix all of this. What we can do is open the eyes of those in our family so they can see the truth. And the truth is going to be one thing, but you have to look at it. You have to agree to comprehend. Cognitive dissonance will ruin the whole thing. I know I had it for all my life. I didn't know it. I cured myself of it when I was 75. You have to want to know. So then let's take a look at the progress that we have. We went from the 1600s to 1776, doing our very best to stay away from Europe and the kings and the monarchs and all that was going on over there that we left there to be away from and brought it with us, along with the king's governors and etc. And for 100 and however many years, we lived in the New England and across the East Coast. And we learned a great deal from the Indians, the Iroquois, Algonquin, that group. They knew all about men and women with their progeny on the land and soil as being sovereign. They did not have a king. They had a republican form of government, and they sent representatives to large gatherings and they decided how to live and they formed a social compact. And it worked really well, but they were Stone Age and they had no written language. So after 100 and some years, our founding fathers wrote up our paperwork based on what they had learned from the indigenous people. Then they couldn't govern with their first document, so they had to make a new one. They kept the old one and made an addition. The addition was called the Constitution. They sent it out all to the states, and the states sent them back except for Rhode Island and Providence Plantation. They inaugurated Washington without Rhode Island. Rhode Island came later, just before Vermont came in. New York held up Vermont for years. Vermont was an independent nation all by itself. Texas wasn't the first independent nation to join us. Vermont was. They keep that one hidden too. So we have a constitution, and all of the states are party to that constitution. We're not. If you read through it, you'll find citizen in there twice with the capital C. I'm in that bunch whenever I choose to be, because I'm a free man. I am sovereign. And sovereign isn't the same as a free man. A free man indicates that he may have been something else before he was free, such as a serf or a slave. Not necessarily true if you're a sovereign. Mindset, you got to have it. The people that are into the de facto, which is present, must be adhered to, can't get away from it, it's there. The de facto is illegal and illegitimate and has been since 1861. It's been a benevolent military government brought on by Lincoln and the Lieber Code, and it has never been done away with. It's still there. I checked with the Army Heritage Group. I forget exactly what, but it's there, was there. The Department of Defense has done away with the Army Heritage Group, closed it down. I talked to a guy in Yuma, Arizona. He used to work for him. He works for the government now in another place. That's his business. That's what he does. He works for the government. And he knows, just as I know, the truth. And he helped me. Yes, Ron, the Lieber Code is still in force. They updated it in 2018. The Army is still party to the fraud upon the people that was started in 1861. That bunch in the Army, the members of the bar, all of them, American Bar Association, the Oregon State Bar, and every other state bar you can figure out, that bunch and the Army and all we the people of the United States of Washington District of Columbia, Inc., which is bureaucratic employees, judges and attorneys, elected congressional people, all of them. They're all in on the fraud. It's to their best benefit that it remain that way. The white hats in the swamp and the black hats in the swamp may kill each other, but they're not going to ruin their habitat. That's for sure. They haven't and they won't. We have to change them. And it's not hard. It's just almost impossible. But it's simple. Every one of them has to have a proper oath. And they don't. So they either take a proper oath or they stand exposed. They have no clothes. We're confronting sheriffs all over Oregon, and they're cowering. They won't answer the phone. They send their assistant or their secretary or a sergeant. Anybody but having to do it themselves. They can't look us in the eye. We post on their bulletin board in Marion County, and they take it down, and we catch them. We raise hell. They apologize and put it back up. And Brandon took a picture every day for 30 days. It's a done deal. You can't run away from it, but they do. They do by ignoring it, by hiding. So what has to happen is they have to be confronted by a court. And a court is any four members of the court. We're fortunate enough to have marshals also. We went to the trouble to figure out, how do you do a court? So we did one. Then how do you do an Article 3, Amendment 7 court? Oh, okay, so we did one. And how do you make a marshal? All right, so we did that. How do you become the provisional government on Oregon? Oh, okay. It's all written down. It's all written down from the very beginning, exactly how you do it and how you wrest back from the powers that should not be our constitutional Republican form of government. And you do it with an oath. If your sheriff, my sheriff, any sheriff, does not have the courage to stand in front of four of us as a court and pledge his oath verbally and in writing and sign it and have it as a jurat by people that do not rebut him and agree. We have a sheriff with the proper oath to the proper constitutions, with the laws of nature and nature's God included. That's not hard. It's not like difficult to do, and there's a lot of arithmetic involved, abstract reasoning. None of that's really important right now. What's important right now is a proper oath. On Oregon, November 8th, 1910, the carpetbagger Frank Benson, Frank Benson, carpetbagger from California, an attorney who was Secretary of State twice. And the second time he was Secretary of State, they got the governor to resign. That made him governor, just like Kate Brown. And he made governor. And you cannot be governor and Secretary of State at the same time, but he was. So that becomes color of law. It's not legitimate, it's illegal. And they all know it. And then they put in Article 7 amended, a different way to run the judiciary on Oregon. They left in the original, the one that was written up in 1857 and allegedly accepted by the United States of Washington District of Columbia without the ink in 1859. So we're pretty sure it exists, but we can't prove it. But then they can't prove it isn't because they won't show the documents. But the documents are available. They're available in other places. And they'll be there when we need them. And we need them now. Really soon, it's going to come to a real critical point on Oregon. When courts of four stand up all over this state of Oregon, which is Oregon the state, in a de jure form of government. When people all over stand up in courts of four and demand their sheriff take a proper oath, they'll either have to take a proper oath or they'll have to hide. Or they'll have to come out with their guns blazing because people will not accept it. People don't know they don't have an oath, but everybody knows you're supposed to take one. They've seen it on television and newsreels. Did I date myself? Uh, their whole life. Everybody takes an oath and they show it. And I've been to them. I've been to oaths in the city of Beaverton where the chief of police swears in his new cops and listen to it. And they, many of them, think they're doing the right thing. Yeah, I've got an oath, but it's an improper oath. And when you take an oath that's improper, you have a lie. So they're living a lie, but they don't know it's a lie, and they'll defend the lie. So we have to have a preponderance of evidence. And the preponderance of evidence has to be good enough to convince your family, brothers, sisters, spouse, children, parents of the truth. It's not silly stuff. This is actual life and death. They're killing us. And we have to stop that. And we stop it by a social compact, confronting those without an oath, that they either take an oath or they abandon the office that they hold illegitimately. I think that gives a pretty good view of what we're doing. From the top, it's pay attention to the unanimous Declaration of the 13 United States of America, later dubbed the Declaration of Independence. And then the Confederation and Perpetual Union's articles. It's not Articles of Confederation. That's shorthand, abbreviation, and not true. And then it is the United States of America. It's styled specifically. If you don't capitalize the T, it's something else. If you leave the off, it's something else. And that something else is bogus. It's illegitimate. It's de facto. And you have to know that. You have to use it to your advantage. Then there's United States. The several states, 33 of them, make up half of the Constitution's parties. They create it. And then they create the United States. And the United States is Washington, District of Columbia, forts, ports, and needful buildings, and it is almost all totally bogus, totally color law, totally incorporated business. Government is not business. Government is not in business to make money. Government is there for our peace, safety, and happiness. And you have to understand that. You have to be able to stand in your own name. Ron Vroman, Charlie White. You have to be able to stand in your own name, not as anonymous, not as Q, not as Anon, but in your own name. And I yield.
They do not want to let go of this. They do not intend on losing here. And we do not intend giving it back to them.
And then the bullets started flying. Then he jumps out of the car, and he's got both his hands up. And he got out of the car, and he had his hands in the air. He's like, just shoot me then. This is what you want, just shoot me. And they did. They shot him dead. With his hands in the air, and I saw it. I swear to God. He was just walking with his hands in the air. And they shot him. And they shot him dead, and then after he was down on the ground, shot him 3 more times.